I'll kick us off. So yeah, thank you everyone who's joining us today in person or online, or if you're watching the recording of this. We really hope that you get some value out of it. My name's Max McBride. I'm a member of Roots, which is a team that works to support youth and environment advocacy and campaigns groups, primarily in the global south. So we run a lot of capacity building sessions and we work specifically on uh, tackling climate disinformation and helping people to understand what they can do to better identify it, understand it, and respond to it as well. So yeah, across the session that we've planned today and also the one for tomorrow, we're going to be sharing some insights, some tools, and some different approaches from our experience in how you can tackle disinformation and more specifically climate disinformation in your work. And there'll also be an opportunity for some interactivity in the session. So we'll have a couple of breakout rooms where we'll discuss your own insights and experience of the problem and what it's like where you are. This is obviously a Kenyan focused session, so we've kind of tailored the content so that it's as relevant as possible to Kenya, but there's going to be a lot of stuff that's broadly relevant to disinformation and climate disinformation globally too. Um, so yeah, with that said, um, oh, one sec. Yeah, just in terms of practical things, please use the chat function when prompted. As I said, there'll be a couple of opportunities to ask questions. Just raise your hand or put something in the chat and we can answer your questions. And if you can put your video on, that's great. If your internet connection is not good enough, no worries at all. So the first thing to get us going, prepared a little warm-up exercise. So presenters, you can get involved in this as well, actually. So we've got 5 statements, one of which is true and 4 of which are fake. So what you have to do is just identify the one that's true. So we've got the first statement is Napoleon Bonaparte was short. That's the first one. Number 2 is bulls are enraged by the color red. Number 3 is we only use 10% of our brains. Number 4 is that a strawberry is not a berry, but a banana is a berry. And number 5 is bats are blind. So yeah, why don't if people would like to vote in the chat for the one that they think is the true one, um, then we can see what people think and whether you were right or not. Can you guys write in the chat? I hope I've turned that setting on. Anybody able to vote? Oh, we got a vote for 2. So bulls being enraged by the color red. Anyone else? Okay, Levine, you say 2 is true. Brian thinks 5. Rakia, you think 5 too. Okay, last chance for any votes. No need to be sorry, Boniface. Okay, I will reveal the answer. The Dana, you think 2 as well. Layla, you think 4. Okay, Layla, you're the only one who got it right. It is in fact the strawberry fact. Yes, strawberry is not a berry. Because a berry is apparently, I learned this in preparing this, a fleshy fruit produced from a single ovary, but strawberries are what's known as an aggregate fruit. So bananas do apparently fit the definition of a berry. Napoleon was about average height for his time, so it was British propaganda to portray him as is small and power hungry. He was about 5'7". Bulls are colorblind. They get provoked by the matador waving something in their face, presumably, which makes sense. We do use more than 10% of our brains. Neuroimaging shows that, although not all at once. And bats can see a little bit. They are not entirely blind. They do use echolocation um, at night, but yeah, they can see. So yeah, just a little exercise to show how persistent some kind of common misconceptions can be and how difficult it can be to tell um, fact from fiction at times. So in terms of what we're going to be covering today, we're going to be looking at what actually is disinformation, how it's developed, why it matters, and what's driving it. Dana from CAD, which is the Climate Action Against Disinformation Coalition, is going to talk to us about the kinds of legislative and advocacy action that different organizations are taking to address climate disinfo. We've got Boniface Harrison from Where Action Post is going to be talking about the status of climate disinformation in Kenya and how different political agendas shape false narratives and more. Brian Cerrone from Assisa Foundation is going to talk to us a little bit about the intersection of climate science and disinformation and cover some common misconceptions. We'll see if we've got enough people to break into groups and have a discussion. Maybe we'll just do that all together. Um, and then Rukia Ahmed from the Green North Eastern Initiative is going to talk a bit about faith and climate disinformation. And then finally, Layla Abdallah from Youth and Climate Action is going to talk about how young people are being affected by climate disinfo. And then, yeah, as I said, tomorrow we're going to cover more practical tips about how to identify disinformation and a bit of a deep dive into a framework that's been developed to help you assess and respond to disinformation in the appropriate way in your work. So what actually is disinformation? We're going to start off with the basics. So a lot of you might already be working in this space or interested in the field and have different kind of experiences and insights of it. But does anyone know the difference between disinformation and misinformation? If you want to speak on the mic, please feel free to raise your hand or you can put an answer in the chat. And yeah, no cheating if you're one of the presenters and you work on this. The difference between disinformation and misinformation. Any ideas? Boniface, to resend the meeting link to the participants. Um, yes, I will do that. 1 second. Okay, bear with me, guys. Actually, I'll tell you what I do. I'll finish this section and then I'll do that once I've handed over to Dana. So yeah, did anyone have any idea on the difference between misinfo and disinfo? Last chance. No worries. So the difference between them essentially is intent. So they are often used interchangeably, but this is one definition, which is that disinformation is verifiably false or misleading information with the potential to cause public harm. For example, by undermining democracy or public health or encouraging discrimination or hate speech. Um, so yeah, misinformation is simply false information, whereas disinformation, there is an intent behind it, and there is often an agenda as to why it's being shared and an intended outcome. But yeah, at the same time, we should note that not everything that we disagree with is disinformation. It's important not to label it as such, and there should be clear evidence of bad faith and intent to mislead when we're using that term. So a couple of examples here. You can see the example on the left is this sort of fake story that circulated in the pandemic about dolphins being seen in canals in Venice. So it's quite harmless. It was widely spread. There's probably almost certainly not any intention behind it or any agenda. Whereas the post on the right is from a Cameroonian um, PR person for the oil and gas lobby, who's spreading disinformation about renewables. So that's the difference. So I'm going to hand over to Dana now from Climate Action Against Disinformation to talk a bit more about what the coalition is doing in the space.
Thanks, Max. Are you able to share my screen and also resend the link at the same time?
I will do
Share
my
the presentation.
yeah. Just give me a shout when you need to change slides, and I'll do that, and I'll try and dig up and share the link now.
Okay, great. Then I'll try to talk slow at the beginning so you can be focused on sharing the right link to the right people. But anyway, I'm Dana, and I am the General Coordinator for the Climate Action Against Disinformation Coalition. And I'll go into a bit about what exactly the coalition is doing later on in the presentation. But just to move us along, because I know I only have 10 to 15 minutes to present, and I also don't want to overload too much information because I think that this workshop is going to be a lot of input. And by the way, thank you very much to Roots for inviting CAD to share a bit about the work that's going on. I think it's really great to see that this type of workshop is happening, and hopefully it's first of many and more to come. But if we can go to the next slide, I'll just share a bit of an overview about what I'm going to talk to you about. I tried to distill it down as much as possible, again, to not overload with information. First, I'll walk you through what CAD sees climate disinformation as, who CAD is, and what CAD is doing and how it works, with hopefully time for some examples. But there's also lots of examples on CAD's website if you should find yourself interested after my presentation. I encourage you to have a look there, as well as other resources and information about who's in the coalition, as well as our policy asks, which is much too detailed to be sharing in this presentation. But if we go to the next slide, we can also skip to the next, can also jump. Yeah, exactly. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page when we talk about climate disinformation, and Max kindly just gave the introduction about climate disinformation and misinformation in some examples, but it might feel pedantic and very basic to always be talking about definitions, but in CAD's view, it's extremely important to make sure that we all are aware we're talking about the same thing. And that makes us much more stronger and effective when we know we're talking about the same thing, so we can act with the same foundations. So that's why CAD has created a climate disinformation definition, which has been referenced by different elements in the UN climate change policies, et cetera. And it's also on our website, which has more details that you can have a look at. And just to say what it is for CAD is that climate disinformation and misinformation refers to deceptive or misleading content that undermines the existence or impacts of climate change, which is the unequivocal human influence on climate change, and the need for corresponding urgent action according to the IPCC scientific consensus and in line with the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. We also see climate disinformation and misinformation as misrepresenting scientific data, including by omission or cherry picking in order to erode trust in climate science, as well as climate-focused institutions, experts, or solutions. So everyone in the ecosystem eroding of their trust in what they're saying. And also, we see climate disinformation and misinformation as falsely publicizing efforts as supportive of climate goals that in fact contribute to global heating or contravene the scientific consensus on mitigation or adaptation. So that's the definition that CAD has come up with to put us on the same page. And if we go to the next slide, I just say very briefly about how CAD sees the current ecosystem of climate disinformation, which we view as being in an emergency. when talking about climate disinformation, there's billions and billions of dollars being fed into different groups and advertisers to create a coordinated disinformation campaign to make sure that there's confusion and discord amongst the public and to ultimately delay climate action. And we also see a key actor, aside from those giving money to these coordinated efforts, which we often cite as usually the fossil fuel industry. We also see a key complicit actor as social media companies, as they are often or usually the key amplifier of false or news or disinformation, and they currently do not have stringent enough checks on their algorithms and advertising tools, as currently their systems allow for disinformation to be spread rapidly, and also for a profit to be made on disinformation being spread, which we find highly problematic, which I can get into later on. But if we go to the next slide. Now that I've kind of set the stage about what CAD sees as the issue or the problem and the current scene for climate disinformation, I'd like to just share what CAD is. So the Climate Action Against Disinformation Coalition, or CAD, as I've been saying, is a global coalition with 70 plus partners in the climate and anti-disinformation ecosystem. And essentially, we seek to drive advocacy, capacity building, and mass public outreach to win the climate disinformation war. And we seek to use the strengths and expertise of each member to affect change within their areas of expertise for the ultimate benefit of combating against climate disinformation. You can go to the next slide. There's a nice little graphic, Max. Yes, thank you. And just to explain a bit more about the makeup of the coalition, so many of the partners are studying climate disinformation globally and also regionally and at local levels and its impacts on climate actions. So our members operate across various regions with a lot of different theories of change, such as grassroots activism like Roots, or press activation, direct lobbying, brand activism. And also we work with parts of the media ecosystem, so with traditional press, online platforms, and fossil fuel influence campaigning. And this diverse coalition allows for many different frameworks and many different methodologies as possible. So we use quantitative and qualitative methodologies, investigative journalism, desk research, et cetera, and just all in the name of leveraging the parts of the coalition, so the members' capacity to achieve shared goals. And of course, members are free to participate on their own objectives. For example, during COP conferences, which is the UN climate change conference that happens every year, we tried to centralize member research resources, known as the COP Intelligence Unit, to make the most of this key moment in climate action, which happens every year. And we also look at making sure that we're planning and collectively resourcing what we call surge activities for major events and milestones. So for G20, elections, COP29, which is coming up in November in Baku, to make sure that we're all prepared for different communication moments. And we also have working relationships and joint policy asks with other counter disinformation networks, et cetera, such as around public health or electoral integrity. So we try to unite across the disinformation ecosystem, not just within the climate and disinformation ecosystem, as we're fighting usually the same types of battles, and we can really learn from each other and build on synergies from experiences. And really just help to amplify the message that we are seeing needed to be changed in terms of rectifying the bad actors, so to speak, in systems that are allowing for climate disinformation to spread. And if we go to the next slides, I just included a little slide about the vision of CADS, and I won't read out all of the values there, but I'll let you have a look. And just to say that our CAD's main vision or main goal is to stop disinformation from preventing climate action. And we promote science-based conversations about climate change, ally deeply with other progressive movements, and fight fossil fuel interests and culture warriors who aim to manipulate the climate narrative. That's essentially, in a nutshell, what we're seeking to do. And if we go to the next slide, and you can also jump over that one. to kind of give you a snapshot of how that actually works. How do we achieve that vision? So we seek mainly to weaken the disinformation industry, and I've tried to distill it down to three parts, which looks at undermining profitability, and that looks at corporate action, so making sure that tech company responses to climate disinformation are implemented. We also seek to erode legitimacy of these actors that are spreading climate mis and disinformation, and discredit them and expose them as super spreaders. We also seek to create material risks for those who are allowing or actively spreading climate disinformation, to ensure that there are financial incentives removed for spreading misinformation, and just to make sure that there are repercussions for these actions that are harming public good. And if we go to the next section, so we also are seeking to, via dismantling the disinformation industry, we also at the same time seek to empower climate action. And that can look at, I also tried to distill it down into three different areas, which can be difficult. But mainly we look at trying to increase public scrutiny and raise awareness, and build capacity to equip the movement with tools to effectively and rapidly respond. We also, as I outlined just before, we want to disrupt the disinformation networks, and expose the bad actors behind those that are perpetuating disinformation. And we also seek to strengthen democracy. And we do this through ensuring that there is regulatory and policy change. So we seek to have legislative win to punish bad actors, as I was mentioning in the previous slide. And also to ensure that social media platforms are changing their models and behaviors, especially around their profit systems and algorithms. So if we go to the next slide, this is just an example of how CAD has been able to, one of the prongs of how they've been able to shift the narrative in media, which is engaging with traditional media and also online media to ensure that there is awareness raised about what is actually happening in terms of the systems of, in terms of social media, and ensure that there's a narrative change and awareness raising around the spread of climate disinformation, as it's a fairly overlooked topic or not known in public discourse. So that's one of the areas that CAD seeks to raise awareness around. And if we go to the next slide, another area that we are very passionate about is influencing decision makers. So that looks at working with different major decision makers right now in the UN and the EU and the US is where our main area of focus is, as those are where the main tech providers are located and where we see the most room for win, essentially, with the different legislations coming out. So this is also an area that we're looking at and working on to make sure that these different institutions are embedding, addressing climate disinformation within their legislation and policies. For example, in the EU, the DSA, the Digital Services Act, is a piece of legislation that we've been actively working on with the EU and the EU Commission to ensure that there is effective, strongly worded policy implementation regarding climate misinformation being spread across different tech platforms. And we're actually actively working with them. We were just in Brussels last week to talk with them about the progress. We also do quite a bit in terms of working with different big tech actors. And I just mentioned that we work with policymakers and creating policy to help affect change within the big tech policy, internal policies, and how their algorithms and systems are affected. And we do that not only through direct advocacy with working with the different policymakers. We create research projects, research reports. We conduct many analyses. And most recently, we've conducted quite a few analyses looking at the platforms that are shown on the slides. Meta, Twitter, Google, and Pinterest, among others. And we found that despite recent policy changes and changes within their guidelines, that all platforms continue to underperform in their response to implementing legislations like the EU's DSA that I just mentioned. And there have been quite a few changes that we've effected as a result of our direct advocacy, but it's still not enough. We still see there's lots of room for improvement addressing climate misinformation, specifically in advertising or community standards. And there's currently not enough tracking or reporting on users who spread the climate disinformation. And there's just a lack of policies against greenwashing, et cetera. And that I will pause there because I could talk for hours about CAD's work and the great efforts that we're doing to work on holding big tech to account, and also ensure that lawmakers also understand how they can also play their part in holding them to account to prevent the spread of climate disinformation. But we only have so much time in this session, so I'll pause there. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and please have a look at CAD's website if you have any more questions or thoughts, or just curious around our different policy positions and asks. But thank you so much, and I will stop there.
Great. Thank you so much, Dana, for sharing that. And yeah, I encourage you all to check more of Kat's work out. I dropped the link into the chat again. I can see we've got a few more people who've joined, which is great. Welcome to you guys. So I posted the link in the chat again because I'm not sure if you can see the chat prior to you having joined. So I'll go back to the other slides now. And let's go to the next one. So yeah, a little bit now, and I'll move through this quite quickly, but just wanted to talk briefly about the bigger picture of why disinformation matters, and also a little bit about why we do find ourselves in a moment where it is getting worse at the moment. So I think in terms of why it matters, it's quite obvious, but it is worth restating that, the way that we make decisions as societies and as beings is based on reliable information and community. And nowadays, the majority of that information comes from social media. But unfortunately, disinformation is really toxifying the environment online, especially, and is making it very hard for people to understand what's real and what isn't, and specifically in regards to climate change and climate action, it's enabling the opponents of climate action to cloud and delay efforts to fix the crisis. So it's incredibly important that we do something about it. In terms of why climate is becoming a particular target for this kind of stuff, the landscape around the climate crisis has changed a lot in recent years. It's, as Dana mentioned, it's become a really big part of the culture wars relating to identity politics and partisanship, and in the global north especially, it's that is the case. We've also seen in the global majority and in global south, we see it used as a way to say that the climate crisis is a hoax meant to keep global majority countries from reaching their economic potential. So there are different narratives that circulate in different parts of the world. But yeah, in terms of politics becoming much more linked to identity, it means that the people that are talking about climate change and the climate crisis have really changed. So where it used to be people who were experts in the industry, politicians or institutions, you now have a really vast ecosystem of people, especially online commentators, influencers, who are using climate as a means to generate engagement and clicks for their own channels and basically exploiting it as a an issue that they know is divisive and gets views. And this is not random. It's not organic. It's being coordinated by powerful interest groups, primarily the oil and gas lobby and their powerful allies in politics and the media. Um, and as we find ourselves in a year where there are over 70 major elections. This year, it's increasingly becoming very much weaponized around elections as well. So we do need strategic interventions at scale to stop the agenda of those who are attempting to derail climate action. In terms of why it is reaching a fever pitch at the moment, misinformation and disinformation thrive in times of crisis. We're living in a time of multiple crises that are related and happening in parallel. You can see from the graphic here some of the different themes of crisis and challenge that are feeding into each other. We've got general geopolitical instability, economic problems that flow from that, increasing wealth inequality, with a lot of people dissatisfied at the moment, and decreasing trust in institutions and sources of reliable information. So yeah, people are losing trust in the places that they previously got reliable information, whether that's media and journalism, governments, international organizations, or even civil society groups like NGOs, like ourselves. These organizations have traditionally been the gatekeepers of information that people rely on, but that's no longer the case, and people are turning elsewhere for their information. And as Dana also alluded to, social media companies have a big role to play in this. They continue to be much more part of the problem than they are the solution, although they do have the opportunity to be very much part of the solution. You have algorithmic amplification, which is a big part of the problem. Platforms have made some effort to moderate content, but unfortunately, disinformation is still circulating very widely, and moderation is quite inadequate despite the promises that different platforms have made. Obviously, Elon Musk's acquisition of X has meant that platform has become much more of a breeding ground for disinformation. And even more than that, so social media companies are actively profiting from harmful and untrue content, especially around climate, often taking money for adverts from fossil fuel companies and targeting them at susceptible users. So that needs to be changed, restructured in order to start to address the problem, and that's something that coalitions and organizations within CAD are working on. And it's a long road, but it's very much the heart of the issue in many ways. Next, alongside the role of social media companies and the general sort of political and economic landscape, you also have authoritarian regimes disproportionately in the global majority who are increasingly exploiting the legitimate issue of disinformation online and in social media in order to crack down on free speech and dissent. So we see a lot of internet shutdowns. I know that those of you in Kenya will have recent experience of that. There've been multiple examples in Africa and also beyond, where internet connectivity is restricted in times of crisis to silence protests, manipulate elections, cover up things, whatever the authorities want to use that restricted internet to achieve. We've also seen legislation targeting free speech and weaponizing the fight against actual disinformation. So, for example, the disinformation law in Turkey, which gives authorities the power to charge journalists and campaigners for publishing information they deem false, We've seen the anti-social media bill in Nigeria a few years ago, which again gives wide-ranging powers to government to shut down the internet and to silence free speech. So that's another element of the issue. Um, there are solutions. Even though bad actors are driving a lot of this problem, they're still a small subset of the population. And as more of us learn about the issue and teach others around us to do the same, we can certainly build up resilience in numbers. And there are lots of good organizations and people working on these issues. So yeah, we need to disrupt the disinformation economy, um, change the way that social media works so that they're not profiting from disinformation, specifically climate disinformation, and start to win the policy change that we need to tackle the problem. So I'm going to hand over now to Boniface Harrison from Wem Action Post to talk a little bit more about the situation in Kenya. Over to you, Boniface.
Yes, thank you so much, Max, and everyone who has joined this training workshop. And the journey of preparing this has been long, and much appreciation to Max from Roots Organization, from Greenpeace, and all the speakers that we have, and Brian Serone from Mrs. Limited. That is the team that has actually put up this together with my Action Post. So thank you very much, and I'll go straight into discussing politics, climate disinformation, and the need to act. And the choice of this topic is because politics is a very integral aspect of a society, because it is through politics that policies are made, and the policies are what becomes laws that govern our daily life and guide our behavior. So we can proceed to the next slide. Yes, there is a way that political agenda shape climate narratives. And we have a recent occasion that happened in Kenya where the finance bill was rejected. And part of the reason why the finance bill was rejected was because there were proposed policies that would target plastics and non-biodegradable products. And this really created an uproar, and greatly was because the policies were not well understood or well explained by both the political class and the citizenry. And so there is, since a climate change is a social, it's a societal problem, politics becomes a very big challenge to how it is tackled, and the initiatives that are actioned towards making positive change. And politicizing climate action has been a trend where political agendas frame climate issues to sway public support or advance party interests. While politicians make policies, there are times when politicians also make certain statements and make certain policies and take certain stands about climate issues so that they can favor their stand in their party. You will see, I've actually recently seen a political party that is focused on as a name with climate issues. There are other parties that will oppose climate narratives, or try to sway climate narratives in the interest of showing that they are fighting for the people. In Kenya, as I said before, the rejection of the finance bill and the eco levy illustrates how clear policies create public distrust. Yeah, when they are not well explained to the people. Industry lobbyists fund disinformation to protect profits, such as delaying eco levy implementation in Kenya. And this is not informed by any factual statistics, but we can speculate that there are people who, when these policies are about to be implemented, they feel threatened. And so they fund protests, they fund uproar, they try to change the public opinion so that their businesses are not affected. Yeah, while these policies affect cost of living and everything, they are of much more interest to the business people, and their influence can derail even international agreements and national and environmental progress. Here in Kenya, we have, and not even in Kenya actually, it's a continental organization where we have seen people turning against the presidency of the COP at some time, because the president of the COP was a oil merchant. So that makes um, politics become a great derailment on how international agreements are done. Misinformation's influence. Misinformation fuels confusion, leading to resistance against essential reforms. And that is the whole essence of why people spread fake news. The politicians use vague terms like targeting cartels to evade responsibility and delay policy reinforcement. For example, during the the plastic ban, you'll see sometimes when a politician gets to a point where they feel their career is threatened, the people who are not clearly understanding what they are doing, they will turn against what they are pushing and say cartels have overwhelmed them. The space is full of cartels, so I can't do much. My hands are tied. And that is just to evade responsibility because they do not want to tackle the real issues. We can go to the next slide. Yes. Political disinformation has consequences to for vulnerable communities, and particularly in Kenya, the arid and semi-arid lands regions are northern Kenya, eastern Kenya, parts of coast, parts of Nyanza. Those are places which are frequently affected by dry weather. And these communities face escalating climate impacts due to policy delays. Yeah. Sometimes policies that are geared towards empowering farmers, that are geared towards eradication of, actually, in some vulnerable communities like in northern Kenya, plastic ban would be very essential, because when animals, because the communities are largely pastoral, when animals feed on plastic, they die. Yeah. So such policies are delayed because of push and pull that is orchestrated by politicians. And also, these communities have inadequate representation in politics. And so that means their interests are not well catered for. And so they always suffer the consequence of the bigger fishes. Because, for example, in northern Kenya, just people, leaders are just beginning to penetrate into government, into significant positions in government. Even in eastern Kenya, for a very long time, eastern Kenya has not had a representation that is key in government. So that makes them lag behind because they do not have the clear information, their interests are not pushed, and they do not have anyone to explain anything to them. Disinformation weakens adaptation, leaving communities more exposed to drought and food insecurity. It has reached a point where the label for dry areas in the asal areas in Kenya is terming them to be malnourished, and so that has made it look like that is how those places should be. People do not see the need that there is urgent need to make policies that are geared towards making the situation of the people better. There is a need to combat climate disinformation, and countering misinformation will ensure that policies are effectively communicated and implemented. Yeah, because that means the government and the politicians will practice a level of sincerity, which might be too much to ask for from politicians, but there is a need to ensure that the policies that the government is doing are well communicated, and that they can create public trust such that people can know what the government is doing is for their interest, best interest actually. And so clear factual narratives are crucial for protecting vulnerable regions and holding politicians accountable. When a politician, for example, uh, propagates an unfactual issue, a matter that is not formed on facts. And this is the seriousness that I would like us to take climate issues and climate information about. I know there are many people who believe climate issues, climate action is a Western issue. It is an ideology by Europeans, and that is not true, because in our context in Kenya, we can witness firsthand occasions where climate has changed. And climate changes when, for example, the rains are not as usual as they used to be. The temperatures are not as usual as they used to be. And we all have education and studied that over a period of 30 years, conditions, the average weather conditions will change. So that makes it a universal issue. It makes climate change an issue that happens everywhere in the world. So first of all, we need to make peace with that fact that climate is changing and it has to change, and nobody is stopping it from changing, but we need to actually do what we need to do to make sure that we are safe and that the future generations are also safe. And for that reason is because we know that sometimes when climate changes, when areas that used to receive rainfall do not receive rainfall anymore, that makes people and animals and property die. And so, anyone who is making jokes and fun of such an issue that is causing human suffering, there are floods, there are droughts. Do you really think that we should not take serious action against such people? We should, because people spread fake news, people spread um, negative propaganda about very serious issues. And for that reason is why we all need to come together and ensure that the information we are spreading about climate change is actually informed, yeah, so that we can all ensure that our society joins hands to create a better livelihood for everyone. Yeah, so that should be the last slide, right? You can put the next one with thank you, so that I can thank everyone. Thank you very much for being part of that presentation. That was just to share an insight into how politics propagates climate disinformation, the dangers that poses, and the need for politicians to be more cautious, and for us as people to come together and ensure that we receive information and we take climate action with the seriousness that it deserves. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Boniface. That's great. And to those of you who've joined in the last few minutes, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have a presentation from Brian Cerrone now from ISISA Foundation about some of the climate science and common misconceptions around the climate crisis. And then after that, we're going to break out into groups and have a bit of a discussion about climate disinformation in your context. So I'll hand over to Brian now. Hey, Brian, are you with us? Okay, I'm not sure what's happened to Brian. Maybe we've lost him, but uh, Rukia, are you ready to do your presentation now? Could I hand to you? And then maybe Brian can go once he's got back. Rukia, are you with us? Okay, I don't know where Rukia has gone. Brian just sent me a message saying my network is now misbehaving. Can move to the next. Okay. Last call for Rukia. Are you there? Okay, I think we seem to have lost Rukia as well. That is unfortunate. Okay, all right. I tell you what. In which case, let's move to the discussion. And we're going to break off into breakout rooms. So I can see that we've got about 20 of us. So I think I'll split us into two rooms. So just give me a moment to do that. And we're going to answer um, a couple of questions together. I'll share my screen again, bring the questions up. So these are the prompt questions. We're going to talk about what kind of disinformation that you see most frequently, what trends or patterns have you noticed, if anything? Do you have any observations? Who do you think might be behind the kind of disinformation, specifically the climate disinformation that you're seeing? And why are they spreading what they're spreading? Has your government ever shut down social media? And is there an example of a piece of disinformation or conspiracy that you believed? So I'll leave this up on the screen. You can move through those and just have a bit of a chat as a group. Don't worry if you don't get to all of the questions, that's fine. And we'll come back together afterwards, and someone from each group can just share a little bit about what you talked about. So okay, just bear with me while I do this. Okay, I'm opening the rooms now. Okay, so yeah, if you've got a message saying join breakout room, then just accept that message and you'll move to the breakout room and you can join in the discussion. I can see that there's a few people in each room now, so that's good. If anyone's having trouble joining, let me know and I'll see if I can help. Maybe Boniface and Brian, you could drop in on one of the rooms each. Are you happy for me to move you to one of the rooms? and we'll have about another 5 minutes discussion.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, cool. Just sent you the invitation. For the guys who've just joined, we're just having a discussion in groups about climate disinformation in your experience and your context. So we've moved to two different breakout rooms. So Muwanesi, Robert, and someone on a Samsung. I'll assign you guys to a room as well. So you just need to accept the invitation. All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I hope that you had a good discussion. Is there somebody from the first room, maybe Boniface or anybody else who would like to just give us a very brief summary of what you guys discussed?
Yes, we discussed about some of the disinformation that we have seen, and we just pointed out at some people who say that the world is ending in a few years, which is not true, because it's scaremongering and making climate issues look so supernatural and out of this world. Yet they are things that we can also manage in reality. Maybe I can give it to any other member of the team who would like to add something to our discussion.
Anyone else from the team who wanted to add anything?
Or maybe to if even if it is not something new, just to expound more on what we already discussed. I would also encourage all of us to be very active and interested in taking part, so that we exchange perspectives and make the session even more better.
That's great. And how about from group two? Is there anyone who can share what you guys talked about?
Thank you, Max. From group two, we've shared, like in Kenya, the government is putting an effort of planting trees and not growing trees, because many of the politicians have taken the initiative just for their own benefit and to publicize their work, instead of making the impact of growing tree to the benefit of the society to be seen as a whole. We've also had one share from Uganda, the impact of the oil drilling in the communities. The companies come, they want to check on their activities, but they have not put much impact on what is going to happen to the communities around. So this has been there is a lot of disinformation that is being spread towards this, to the communities that are living around. And also there is also an issue where the communities are not taking the climate impact to the seriousness it deserves, because many are not considering it as something important. Some are taking like the impact of climate change to be something from witchcraft or other like supernatural things that are not aligned to it. So these are some of the discussions we've had, and among many others from group two. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Levine. It sounds like an interesting discussion. Okay, so next is Rukia with us? Are you back with us, Rukia?
Yes, Max.
Great. If you're ready to present, then that would be wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Take it
I
away.
am.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Maybe confirm. Sorry, I'm having like so many technical issues today, unfortunately.
That's okay. Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. So because of this, I will not be able to share a presentation and slides. Maybe I can share afterwards. Yeah, mine was to tackle about faith and climate disinformation. First of all, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Sorry, I forgot about that. My name is Rukia Ahmed, and I'm from Green Northeastern Initiative. I'm happy to join you for this session. And I'm tackling faith and climate disinformation. Most importantly, it's good to know, first of all, is there a connection between faith and climate before I even go to what are the kind of disinformation that happens around faith and climate change? Yes, there is so much connection between faith and climate change. And because most of the people of faith, our scriptures and our cultural values and our spirituality connects us to our planet Earth. We call it Mother Earth, Mother Nature, because we all believe that in different scriptures there are different messages, but the common thing they all agree together is that human or the mankind are stewards of this earth, and we are created to be more of to take care of this earth and to benefit from the planet, at the same time to utilize everything that is there but not misuse it. So whatever we do with the earth, we will bear the consequences. Like Islam, we are called as Khalifa of the earth, meaning stewards of the earth. As a Khalifa, it's a responsibility placed upon me as a person to take care of the earth. And another verse says, eat and drink from the earth, but do not be extravagant. Do not misuse. For God doesn't love those who misuse and those who are wasteful. So there's so many verses. Maybe I'll share another day how much faith, how much connection there is climate and faith. But for us, there's so much connection, and why this is very important. At the same time, this connection between faith and climate can be used and misused. So someone can use it in the right way, like my organization. We work with so many people of faith, and sometimes we use, when we are communicating climate education, we use the faith perspective so that we explain things better, and someone can really relate to what water means to me as a young person, and what does planting one tree mean to me, and what does it mean to be an environmental steward. Coming to the next question is, there's so many misinformation in regards to faith and climate. One of the common things is that we will do whatever we want with the earth. At the end of the day, God will take care of it. And it's like there's this kind of misinformation that someone just says, you have no business taking care of the earth, because at the end of the day, God is the supreme being who created this planet and is responsible for this planet. This is a misinformation because clearly the different scriptures are showing us that we as stewards, maybe people don't understand who stewards are, and maybe that is why they are misinforming people that now it's God's business to take care of this planet. But to the contrary, we're supposed to live in harmony. That is the best way I can describe, live in harmony with nature. Sorry, am I still audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. So we're supposed to live in harmony with nature. And for us, we have that much responsibility. And we should not be misled that it's just the work of God, and now we don't have any business in taking care of the planet. Another thing is that another common misinformation is that the earth will recover on its own. At the end of the day, I saw someone sharing a message that at the end of the day, the earth will recover on its own. This is another disinformation. Because as much as God has created the climate, human efforts are relevant, not as people say they are relevant. Because we have to look at the perspective why we are created and why we are living on this planet. And we're not just, as people of faith, we believe that nothing happens just because it has to happen. Everything must have a reason, and every living being, every structure, may it be a mountain, may it be a river, like we have that concept that everything plays a role, and there's no way we can say that the earth will recover on its own, God will fix it, and those are more of cliches. And this has also been spread by social media and the other tools people use to spread this. So what are these kind of information that will make us see that these things are irrelevant, you know? Another thing is that, another thing people say is that at the end of the day, the art is just created for us to utilize it. But there's something we are forgetting, that we're supposed to live in harmony with nature. And as much as we are eating from nature, whatever we do comes from the planet. And at the same time, what we are forgetting is that whatever action we take comes with a consequence. And today, let's say I cut down all the trees because let's say I'm supposed to use the trees, right? But I cut down all those trees. Next day, I don't have medicine to come from those trees. I don't have food and fruits to come from the same trees. So it's like I'm causing disaster using my own hands. And I'll quote this with a reference from the Quran that says, we are the people who spread corruption on earth and misuse on the earth. But we forget that we are the ones who will live with the consequences of our own action. So these are the kind of so much disinformation that's happening. So how do we counteract this? As much as this disinformation is there, how do we counteract? First thing first, we need to encourage people to understand their own spiritual values, because our spiritual values and our spiritual teachings are the ones that give us our culture. They transform our habits. Like for me, every day I wake up and the kind of spiritual values I have will shape the habits I do every day. Like usage of water. Like for me, I use water to take ablution for my prayers and things like that. So informing people to understand their own scriptural teachings. For me, if I understand what the Quran says about the planet, then if I see someone sharing information that is not as per the Quran, I'll be able to correct them and I will not just conceive that and I will not be deceived. But for me to understand my own scriptural values from my faith perspective, if you're a Christian, understand from your faith perspective. If you relate to some scriptural values, it doesn't have to be any, just whatever values that shape your morals, you have to understand what context are you coming from so that any information that's shared, you will not just take it as it is. Another thing is faith leaders play a crucial role in correcting this kind of information that is shared, because most people, maybe I might not have all the time to just read my own scripture, but I would like to listen from a faith leader in the mosque or maybe someone in the church or somebody else in the community. So these people need to be empowered so that they correct this kind of information that is shared, because the misinformation that is happening will delay climate action. Imagine someone saying that it's the work of God to just take care of this planet. So I'll not see the need to do any climate action, to see the climate crisis as an urgent matter. And I will not be even bothered to take any action because I have this kind of information with me. So the faith leaders will be crucial in kind of playing a role in simplifying this information and sharing the right information to the people. Another thing is you as a person, as a young person, try to see what does your faith say about the climate, environmental conservation. You have connection with water. You have connection with the rivers. What does the tree mean in your own scriptural beliefs? You as a person, how do you relate with water? And what values do you get from water, from all the other aspects of our biodiversity? And through your personal connection with nature, you'll be able to understand what it means to you as a person rather than just the popular opinion of the people. And with this, you'll be able to help a lot, because once you understand that climate action really matters to us as people, as a person, you as a person, whether you connect it to your faith or your religious beliefs or a religious scripture or a verse, whatever it is, you as a person. So how connected are you with nature? So when I share information that's not right about climate and faith, then you'll not be able to be misled. So in conclusion, climate is urgent, climate action is needed, and our art is beautifully created by God. And we are here to be the, stewards of the art, not to destroy it. As kind of information we share around, the kind of connection we have with our planet, and it should be a person to art, connection, rather than just always looking for the popular opinion of what does this say about the planet, so that you as a person, you'll be able to understand from your own context, and you'll be able to take action at your personal capacity. Thank you so much. That's for now. Back to you, Matt.
Thanks so much, Rukia. It's a really, really interesting and important area that isn't often discussed, in my experience at least. So it's great to hear your perspective. I am aware that we're nearly at the previously advertised finish of the session. If people are able to stay a little bit longer, we can stay probably for another 10 or maybe 15 minutes. But if you do have to drop off, then no problem. We'll have a little bit of space for comments and questions at the end as well. So I'm going to hand over now to Layla Abdallah from Youth in Climate Action to talk about her perspective. Take it away, Layla, and I'm going to share the slides for you.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, this has been an insightful session, and I would like to talk about youth and climate disinformation. I'll be tackling next. I'll be tackling why youth are vulnerable to climate disinformation, impact of climate disinformation on youth, solutions that youth can use to tackle disinformation, and what we can do. Okay, so when you look at fact why youth are vulnerable to disinformation, you look at the youth, especially in Kenya, we are like the highest population. We are more than 15 million, and realize most of us are on social media platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, where you realize there is much climate disinformation circulating, and it spreads very quickly because climate disinformation is created to trigger emotional reactions like anger, fear, such emotions that will make you not be aware that this is false information. We also have emotional vulnerability and susceptible to fake news. So you realize that most youth are unable to detect and are usually have emotions and are likely to consume and feel like that the disinformation is true, because climate change evokes very strong emotions, especially among the youth, because they are the ones who are affected by drought or floods or anything, so they really have strong emotions towards this. There's also, it's difficult to distinguish between reliable information online. So there's a digital literacy gaps, and it requires somebody to be tech savvy and to differentiate between reliable and unreliable sources. So you need to be equipped with the tools for fact checking and recognizing biases in media, which most people are not having those kind of skills. So we need to amplify the voices to the young people to be able to distinguish such information, websites that are created solely to create this disinformation in our communities and in our societies. There's also limited resource to scientific sources. You realize most youth are not really interested to reading academic journals, scientific reports, or credible sources, which actually carry the facts, because here we're talking about facts. And they rely mostly on internet, which is easily accessible source of information, which can be most of the times less reliable. So we need to create an engaging sessions where youth can be able to access these academic journals and scientific reports. Next, kindly. Now, when we look at the impact of climate disinformation on youth, realize it's very heavy and it affects us mostly because it leads to undermining climate youth movements. So it weakens the youth climate movements by creating internal divisions, because some groups will be exposed to conflicting information. When group A comes with this information, group B comes with this information, just like is it John was saying that now the government is on a rampage of planting trees. We realize some youth will jump onto that bandwagon of just planting trees and not growing trees, maybe because they feel that is the best way and they have been exposed to that, and others feel like there is more that will be done. That is just like the tip of the iceberg. So that will create a really a gap and division among the movements. And it makes harder for youth movements to really gain momentum and exert pressure on governments and industry so that they can be meaningful change in this space and when we are doing climate action. There's also, it leads to climate nihilism. So nihilism is it's the suggestion that whether the world is doomed, no matter what action you take. You understand? Whether we do advocacy, whether we do policy development or tackling climate change. So realize people have just that they're not optimistic about the change they're going to make, regardless how small it is. So youths need to withdraw from this mindset, and we need to have like climate related discussions, that it's not just about the bad thing, but positivity can really come a long way in tackling climate action. There's also the issue of institutions. You see like scientists, governments, environmental organizations, they are being portrayed as dishonest or corrupt. Like how Mama was just saying that the previous chair for COP was an oil merchant. When we are discussing about climate change and you are the one who is at the top there and you're the chairperson, it creates a lot of dishonesty because now you do not believe on this cause. It's eroding credibility and accountability. So people become more skeptical about these international agreements addressing climate change. So it reduces public support necessary for these systemic changes when such things are happening at a global stage. Next. So what are the solutions that youth can come up with? Actually, what we are doing here is a solution in tackling disinformation that is around us. So it's really impactful for us, attending such sessions and learning from each other, learning from trainers. Yeah. So there's also promoting digital and media literacy. Yeah, when you're doing digital literacy, there's also fact checking. You're checking facts from fiction. You're not just looking at information the way it comes. You see, so it's supposed to like recognize the credible sources and identify websites or people that use the digital platforms to spread this information. So this is where the youth can effectively identify and reject climate disinformation. This will reduce its spread to grassroots level and communities. So there's also youth-led climate advocacy and activism. When we youth come together and we do advocacy and we build the movement, we amplify the voices of not just us, but those behind us and those who will come after us in tackling climate disinformation. And this creates a very positive impact on climate change. there's also the factor of collaboration with trusted organizations. And you can have like the way Greenpeace is doing right now. I think Sonone is a foundation. I mean, it's climate action. MEMA is in MEMA Action Post. So when we are able to network and we are able to collaborate together, and we are able to really tackle this disinformation at a more front, we are able to put pressure on institutions or people who are spreading disinformation. So this will really strengthen partnerships when you're able to come together to challenge these false narratives. We can move next. Oh, I think I did it add here advocating for policy change, because we have partnered with KIPRA. KIPRA is Kenya Public Policy Research Analysis, where we'll be doing policies on climate change. And that's really one of the advocating for policies that will support and address climate disinformation and climate action in general. This will contribute to climate change in the long term, because such policies can really have a positive effect when they are implemented and adopted. So then we have like case studies of peace action. Perhaps you can, share your stories, share some of the activities you have been doing, because I'm really sure most of you have been really proactive in changing this narrative, either on social media, either at grassroots level, at your communities, success stories. I'm sure this will be one of our success stories. Yeah. Next. Okay, so what can we do as the youth? The youth are the building blocks. We are the young minds. We are still energetic. We have the brain. We are still fresh. I think we can do critical thinking. We're able to fact check, when we're able to analyze what is fake, what is true, and really curtail this climate disinformation, which is derailing climate change advocacy and efforts. Credible sources. We still need to be aware of credible sources like journals, websites where you can find information, such that we all are reading from the same manuscript. Not like somebody is reading from here, another person is reading from another book, like we are not at par with each other. So we need to be really working towards the same goal, regardless of whatever we are doing. We need to be working toward, if it's the lowering temperatures, regardless of where you are in the climate space, that is the goal. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks so
Any
much,
questions?
Layla. That's really great. And yeah, definitely we're stronger when we work together, and you covered off some of the really important ways that we can all be tackling the problem at a systemic level, and also in our local communities and contexts. So it's great to hear your perspective and what you've been working on. That brings us to the end of the presentations and today's session. I'd love to hear, first of all, if you have any questions for any of the presenters, or further comments on your own perspective on the issue. We've got about 5 minutes that we can take to hear questions and comments. So does anyone have anything that they'd like to share or ask? You can raise your hand, or you can simply unmute yourself and take the mic, or if you prefer, you could put a question in the chat. No problem if no one does at this point. That's all good. I'll just give you another couple of moments if anyone does have something they'd like to say. Okay, cool. Well, in that case, thank you all so much for joining today's session. I hope that that you got some value out of it. It's been really fascinating from my perspective to hear the different speakers and your own insights that you've brought through the discussions. We'll be doing the same again tomorrow, and I really hope to see all of you there. As I mentioned, we're going to be covering some more kind of practical guidelines and tips of how we can assess the risks from different disinformation and specifically climate disinformation, and working through a framework that's been specially developed for disinformation in order to categorize different levels of risk and then respond to it in the best way. So yeah, really looking forward to covering that with you guys tomorrow, and have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you then. Thanks everyone.